Rolling. G'day, Matt. Welcome once again.
G'day, Greg. Once again, really glad to be here and excited about our topic of inclusion today.
Yes, the topic of inclusion, and today is Saturday the 18th of November 2017. And the topic inclusion now as opposed to exclusion. So inclusion, now our friends at Oxford, the Oxford Dictionary, do describe inclusion. Firstly, it's a noun, but inclusion, the Oxford Dictionary has it that inclusion is the action or state of including or of being included within a group or structure. A person or thing that is included within a whole. And the origin of the word inclusion comes from the early 17th century Latin word inclusio. Inclusio. I think from includere or includere, which means shut in. So what I'm trying to do here is provide the foundation, Matt, for further discussion on the subject of inclusion. And can I also add, inclusion can also mean, I think, a sense of belonging, feeling valued, feeling respected, equal access, equal opportunity, and a fair bit more.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. I mean, inclusion's one of those things that we all take for granted in many ways, or quite a few of us take for granted, I suppose, because we are included in family, social, community, cultural activities, whatever it be, just by default. But there's also a lot of people that don't get the opportunity to be included or don't take the chance to be included because they feel that they won't be accepted well, and that's a real worry. And I suppose that's one of those things that we'll definitely have a chat about today.
Yes, and on the subject of the hot topic around Australia very recently and of late has been same-sex marriage, and our government put it out to the people to vote. I think it was a postal vote, wasn't it? And there was an overwhelming, I think it was 61% or more, voted yes, that people should be allowed, people of the same sex should be allowed to marry, to wed. And there is an example of inclusion, of people feeling excluded, you know. So we look at concepts or subjects from that. I would look at, I would include equal rights for all, equal access, equal opportunity, and to feel included, you know.
Yeah, totally. And I suppose regardless of what people's politics are, that the plebiscite has been an example of how people who have felt excluded can actively try and take steps to become more included in the broader part of community and society. So, I mean, it's certainly an interesting case study regardless of people's politics.
Definitely. And if I can also take the opportunity now to bring in our Indigenous brothers and sisters as well. A gentleman called Clinton Pryor, whom I met. He's a 27-year-old, at the time anyway, young fellow, and who walked from Perth, Western Australia, to Canberra, on the east coast of Australia. So a journey which he began in September 2016 and finished up in September this year. And I went to Canberra to greet him on his arrival at the Aboriginal Tent Embassy outside the old Parliament House in Canberra. And I think that was on September the 3rd, if my memory serves me correctly. But anyway, so Clinton walked in, and 5,600 kilometres later, you know. But basically, he walked around Australia, just talking with communities on his way and getting some information, ideas, asking people what they wanted to talk about, what they wanted to bring to the Prime Minister, because Clinton's purpose was to meet with the Prime Minister and also the Governor-General and put the issues of his people and questions and ideas and comments and concerns to the government. Clinton did meet with Malcolm Turnbull, but he wasn't. Clinton said that he wasn't too impressed with the with the Prime Minister's response. He said he wasn't really given much time to talk with him, and didn't really feel like as he was listened to that seriously. However, of course, the issues remain, and Clinton is still fighting to bring those issues of concern for Aboriginal people here in Australia, bring those of concern to the government of the day. He did meet with the Governor General, and he wants those issues also of his people to be brought to the attention of the Queen, and to look for a treaty. Well, there's many other issues, self-governance, self-empowerment, people to run their own race, really. But I thought that was just a great example of someone wanting to, be included. Like, he's living here in this country, and Aboriginal people were, of course, the first people here. And just that, there's another example of inclusion, of sometimes we need to fight for inclusion, to be included in our own community, in our own country, our own land.
Yeah, and I suppose it raises a bigger question again, Greg, is that should inclusion be something that is in law and legislation, or should the platform be put in place so that people can just choose to be included, regardless of sexual, cultural, religious backgrounds or what have you? When people are forced into it through legislation, does it work? I don't know. I think the answer is probably sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Equal pay for women. Our younger people too are getting shafted by some of these government programs to work. They're getting they're getting less money than what they deserve. Penalty rates sometimes aren't paid, or often. But our women who are doing work, particularly in community services fields, are doing just as much as the blokes are doing, even more in many cases, and there's still a big gap in the pay rate. So there is something that we need to look at too. There's an exclusion there, I think, and a discrimination. There is not equality being demonstrated there in that case.
And when is inclusion maybe not to the advantage of the people seeking to be included, or to community? And once again, playing devil's advocate on this front, where does someone's safety fit in when they may not have a capacity to be included in a certain activity? Is that lawfully unfair, or is that lawfully wrong? Is that morally wrong to have that person in that situation where you might be putting them at risk? It's, once again, I mean, this is a devil's advocate question, but inclusion, I think if we're going to have a real conversation about it, as we always try to on these podcasts, I think we need to look at all the various angles, and people can think about these things, and we won't certainly provide any great outcomes or insight, but it's about getting people to think about these things so we can do it better.
Yeah, definitely, I agree there. And there is the thing called dignity of risk also, which is a term used in community services, which basically means a person has a right to not participate in something, and also has a right to fail, inverted commas fail, whatever that means, but in someone else's view, I suppose, fail. And a person also has the right to. This is a bit of a tricky one, but I'll have to go there anyway because I think it's important. A person has the right to have say over their own direction, their own life. So basically, if someone wants to go out and do themselves harm or damage, to me, I don't like to see that. But I think if a person's saying, if a person's wanting to do that, they have the right to do that, or do they have the right to do that? I'm just putting that out there. I don't know if I have the right to stop a person doing that, or I can maybe point out some options, but that's a very tricky one. And I think when we get into the mental health field as well, or that spectrum, you look at things under the Mental Health Act whereby if someone is putting themselves at risk or in danger, and possibly other people in danger too, they can be restrained and taken to hospital and just locked up basically and medicated, and then just sort of seeing where that person's at. Then I'm not is that a fair thing to be doing? That's a big thing. That's really imposing on someone's right to say, I don't want to be included in your plan.
Absolutely, and I suppose you're touching on there is self-determination over duty of care, and that's very much why I asked that question earlier.
Yeah, it's a very tricky one, and so bringing people in, inclusion is bringing people in. Is that what it is, Matt? Is it bringing people in and recognising we are one, but we're not all the same? So, and being inclusive doesn't always mean that we'll be one big happy family either. So, the concept of inclusion, while I think it is a great one and a necessary one, and I think that's just how we should roll as a community. I think that people should be included anyway, or at least given that option. I think people should be given the option to be included. You invite everyone to the party, you invite everyone to the gig, to whatever, and people decide whether they want to come or not. I suppose if someone decides not to be included often, and you know them, well then maybe you might think that, well, that's a little bit out of character. I might go and explore a bit. Go and see what's happening with this person and see if they're okay and is there any reason why they don't want to be included. But I think generally it's got to be an option you give people.
Yeah, totally. I think that hits the nail on the head, really, Greg, is that, and just looking at some of the social and community projects I've been involved over time, it's never been about, someone's gender or culture or religious background or what have you. It's about people coming together, having the opportunity to come together for whatever particular event, whether it's a community garden event or a men's shed event or that kind of thing, people being able to come together regardless of what their background is, regardless of their views and what have you, but just being part of the community as a whole and feeling comfortable within that space.
Yeah, I was talking to someone today and about my approach, because I've done a bit of mental health outreach work with people over the years, and it's an area that I'm very much still involved with and a great passion alongside with making music, which is my main bread and butter, I think. But I'll like to remain involved with some community work. And I remember saying to someone that the way I try to look at it when working with somebody is that we don't leave anyone behind. I try and look at it as if I'm working in a small country town or a village, maybe 50 people, even 20 people. So I can't ignore one person's in trouble. If someone's struggling, I see it and I can't ignore it. And I bring that up to compare, or to kind of, I suppose, compare that to, say, working in the city or living in a city environment where you've got a few million people, and people can very easily get lost and disappear, become disconnected and excluded, not included, even just by default, by just not being recognised or forgotten about, which is easy when you've got so many numbers, like a few million people in the city. So
certainly, yeah, that's a very fair point, because growing up in the country myself, and I imagine things continue to be so, is that everyone found their place in many ways, because it was small enough that you almost fell into it. But in the city, because it's so much bigger, people may actually, we know people feel more isolated often in cities than what they do in regional or country areas.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And you can be in a big city and you get something like that.
Yeah, I was just thinking there as well. So maybe the question is, how do we go about creating more community in our closer, smaller areas, which I know lots of people are trying to do through community neighbourhood houses or just community groups and the likes. And that's probably the starting point of improving inclusion in the city areas and in the suburbs, without having it being forced, with people wanting to be part of it rather than feeling forced through, whether it be legislation or the likes, because it's always going to be much more successful when it's driven by people rather than pushed on people, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I would like to come back to that point in a second, because something else just popped up in my head which I did want to talk about. But I do want to come back to that community inclusion. Also, the let's workshop a couple of little things like how do we include people? What are a couple of things we can do? What can the listener do maybe to get that kind of thing moving? It's a great thing to talk about, but do people tell us how to do it? So maybe we can sort of run by a couple of ideas on how to maybe kickstart a couple of things, or what people can do, whether you're feeling a little isolated or excluded and you want to become included, what you can do, and also if you maybe run a couple of community groups yourself or organisations, what you could maybe do as well. But look, I just wanted to quickly touch on Manus Island, and of course we know that, I don't know I haven't looked at the news or the latest in the last 24 hours, but I do know that power was cut there for a while and water was stopped. Now I'm assuming let's hope they've reconnected those services now, I'm not sure. The United Nations, I think, have called on Australia to say it's a human rights violation. You need to restore power and get some restore living conditions to a standard that's humane or more humane. But I'm looking at those few hundred men who are there. Now, regardless of people's politics and as to why these people are there seeking asylum in this country, still, I look at today's topic of inclusion. We have these guys and other refugees, asylum seekers as well, who are in detention at the moment, women and children, families. But I'm just talking about these guys on Manus Island. They are basically being excluded. They're really in a no man's land at the moment, waiting on who knows what. They have no idea of what their future holds. They're not told really that, you're okay, this is what you'll spend another 12 months here and then you'll move to this process. They don't know that. There's no sort of arranged kind of schedule for them. And we had the new Prime Minister of New Zealand saying that she will take 100 or so of those men from Manus Island and rehouse them in New Zealand and get them going and house them in far more humane conditions. And various members of the Australian community, including Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, have said also, we'll take these men into our homes and we'll house them and look after them. So the Australian government, they're saying, well, don't worry about it. We can save us some bucks and the community will step up and do something. The Australian government is just remaining firm, but they're just saying no. So they're refusing to move on the situation. Here's a situation that I look at, not only inhumane, but just, and regardless of people's politics of why people are here, I'm not even touching on that right now, but that could be for another podcast down the track. But just we have people in inhumane conditions who are being basically excluded.
Yeah, totally. And touching on that as well, Greg, a great way of supporting inclusion and being included in your community is advocacy and being an advocate for things that are important to you. Once again, regardless of what your politics are or the likes, what you believe in, you should be out there having a voice with, because there's other people out there that also share the same voice, and being part of that actually creates inclusion for yourself and for other people. So get out there and put out there what you believe in, and go out to battle for it, because it's important, regardless of what your politics are. Back your beliefs in, because there's lots of other people who would feel the same way.
Yeah, so you're talking about being connected there. It sounds like to me, no matter where you're at, whether if you're cruising along in life fairly well and your things are going pretty well and you're pretty happy go lucky sort of person, and you have a bit of time and the desire to kind of get involved in your community and maybe run a few programs or volunteer in certain areas or get some things moving, that's great. But whether you're also someone who feels like you are not included and feeling a little disconnected, get getting involved in something as well. So how would, if someone's listening out there, Matt, and they're feeling disconnected, not included or excluded, what are some things they can do to kind of get the ball rolling? And bear in mind that a lot of people that may suffer from some common mental health issues such as anxiety, some social phobias. A lot of people find it difficult to even pick up the phone and ring a number. It can be very stressful, very, very anxious. Anxious kind of thing to do. You got any thoughts, any ideas?
Yeah, maybe researching the various areas that you're interested in. If you've got particular interest in, you've touched on asylum seeker support, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, maybe just having a bit of a look at their page and what they offer out there and how you might be able to get involved. That might be the first step, really simple stuff. You don't have to contact anyone, you don't have to have any connection with anyone initially, but by default, by you actually being on their page and learning about what they do, you are starting to connect and include, which is a tremendous way of doing it. So if anyone wants to go further with that, obviously they can research whatever groups they're interested in and contact them directly via phone or via email or whatever it be. But the act of doing that is inclusion, and not only does that include you, but it actually includes them in your life as well. So you're part of something bigger. Once again, it's not about people's politics or beliefs around that. It's about being part of something.
Yeah, well said. And I think sometimes neighbourhood centres or your local community centre have a lot of groups running, a lot of volunteer groups running too, a lot of support groups for people who are struggling in various areas. I know depression, anxiety, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous if you have substance use issues, if you have food use issues, or gambling or whatever it might be. Even if you have none of those things, even if you're just feeling disconnected and you don't drink or smoke or gamble and you eat well and everything, but you're just feeling isolated, maybe just try and find out where your nearest community centre is and gather and ask them. Failing that, you could start with your doctor if you didn't know actually where to start, and they should be able to refer you, get you started somewhere.
Most councils will certainly be able to refer you to either their community houses, their libraries often run a heap of different groups out there. There's something for most people out there at any particular time, and if there's not something there, start it. Find some like-minded people and start a group that offers whether it be support or resources or just a general walking group. Yeah, it could be anything simple. But once you create a platform for inclusion, no matter how small it is, you're actually bringing other people in as well as bringing yourself as part of that inclusion as well, and it connects everybody. Fantastic.
Yeah, well said, Matt. Yeah, so there are those services, you can wander into a library and you can't counsel. But I think we'll probably wind it up about there.
Greg, I know that you were keen for a joke to wrap everything up. I haven't got one this week, but I'll try and come up with a reasonable one between now and the next podcast, and see how we go from there. How's that?
I've got one that's pretty lame, but I won't let the listener down.
We love it.
What do you call someone who hangs around with musicians?
I don't know, Greg. What do you call someone who hangs around with musicians?
A drummer. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.